New York Giants general manager Joe Schoen spoke to the media at the Combine, updating everybody on where things stand with Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and a whole bunch of other topics. We're going to break it all down for you right now on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and as promised, I'm bringing you the latest from the NFL Combine. General Manager Joe Schoen spoke to reporters on Tuesday. He spoke for about 15 minutes or so at the podium. Also did a private session after he spoke at the podium. So I've got everything you need to know from both media sessions, as well as some news that I want to comment on, and that having to do with the Kenny Golladay decision, which I'm going to talk about as well on the show. So happy to have you with us. Thank you for making us your first listen or watch of the day. Let's get right into it. The first topic that I want to talk about is, of course, the contract negotiations for Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. So here are some of the things that came out of Schoen's media session. And just real quick, some thoughts about what Schoen revealed. So Schoen revealed that with Daniel Jones, there was no prior contact with CAA, which was Jones's prior agency. So any talks before he made the switch to Athletes First about Jones wanting, X number of dollars per year, never really happened, I don't think, because neither side ever got around to talking to one another. Now, I can't say this for certain, but I would not be surprised if the reason why Jones moved off of CAA to Athletes First is maybe because things weren't progressing. I think if I were a free agent in Jones's shoes and my agency wasn't talking to the Giants to get something done, I'd probably get a little antsy as well. So I would not be surprised if that's the reason why Jones moved off of CAA. Now, it's also possible that CAA, in talking with Jones about what he might be worth, didn't give him a number that he liked. And Jones probably said, you know what, I don't like the number. I'm going to look elsewhere. I'm going to get an agency that can get me the most possible. So that's possible as well. Now, Schoen didn't say why. He said it was a personal decision for Daniel Jones. But the interesting part is that the two sides never had conversations, CAA and the Giants, whereas Athletes First and the Giants have had conversations. And those are continuing this week at the Combine. As I've mentioned before in shows, the agents are in town as part of a seminar that they have to attend with for the NFLPA. So there will be plenty of face-to-face meetings as well as, discussions maybe over the phone or video conference. Schoen did say that or I should say the Giants and Saquon Barkley are inching a little bit closer. Now, when we last spoke to Schoen, remember it was at the end of the year, the day after the Giants were eliminated from the postseason. So at the time, there was a significant gap between what Saquon was looking for and what the Giants were willing to pay out. That gap has apparently been bridged a little bit. How much, I couldn't tell you, but Schoen seemed very optimistic that things were headed in the right direction there, not just for Saquon, but also for Daniel. And he also made it clear that they can get both guys signed. So if Daniel gets signed first, that doesn't mean that Saquon is gone, and vice versa. They can get both of them done. And I've said this before, the reason why that is possible is that if they can get them on a multi-year deal, that first year's number is going to be lower. And they stagger those first, the new contracts where the first year deal is lower than, years 2, 3, and so forth. So it is certainly possible for the Giants to get both of them done. And Schoen confirmed that. Shane also confirmed that they do have walkaway numbers in mind if things just totally break down. Now, the thing with the walkaway numbers is if they apply the franchise tag to Jones, for example, he can sign that tag and play on it, the 32.417 million. So they really can't walk away from him if that tag is applied, unless they rescind the tag, which I just don't see them doing, to be honest with you. Saquon, if he doesn't get the tag, then obviously they can walk away and he can go and hit the open market. So yeah, they can make this work, but they're not going to, break the bank open and pay an outrageous amount for either player. Shane also admitted that the franchise tag, if they have to use it on Jones, it will put a crimp in what the team wants to do in free agency. Not a surprise, right? I've been saying this for a number of shows. I've written this over on Giants Country. I've done the math for you. It will put a crimp in them because $32 million for Jones will automatically come out of the cap. And interestingly, they can do certain things to open up more cap space, but I highly doubt that they would be able to recoup the $32.417 million that they would have to devote to Daniel Jones if they have to use that franchise tag. So overall, the talks are ongoing. Shane is optimistic. Now, I doubt if he wasn't optimistic, he would say that, because he doesn't want to create panic. But he did reiterate that they want Jones back. He did reiterate that they would like Saquon back. He was asked if he had any doubts about Jones being the quarterback in 2023, and he said he had none. So for those of you who want the Giants to move off of Daniel Jones, brace yourself because it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that's where things kind of stand right now. All right. Coming up next, some news about Kenny Golladay. I want to get a little deeper into that because I'm sure you guys have all heard the news that Kenny Galladay's contract is going to be terminated on March 15th. I'll get into a little bit more detail behind that, what it means, and why the timing is what it is. So that's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the NFL season might be over, but the NBA season is in full swing, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 if their first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to the spread and more. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, Giant fans, thanks for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen or watch every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into the sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we're talking NFL Combine. Joe Schoen, general manager, spoke to reporters at the Combine in both a podium session and a semi-private session afterwards. Usually they go towards the back of the convention hall and they find a quiet spot and they just hold a session just for the beat writers to ask questions. And a lot of the questions overlap, but there's some other nuggets that came out of that session, which I will talk about coming up in this program. But first, I want to talk about the news about Kenny Golladay. And by now, I think everybody knows that the Giants are planning to terminate Kenny Galladay's contract on March 15th, which is the start of the new league year. So, unfortunately, what hasn't been finalized is whether Golladay is going to be a pre-June 1st cut or post-June 1st cut. Now, according to a source, initially we were told that he would be a pre-June 1st cut And then the source came back and said that no decision had been made and it wouldn't be made until March 15th. So what does that mean? Well, here's my theory on that. If the Giants have to tag Daniel Jones, then, they're going to need as much money as they can get to fill in the void of that $32 million that they're going to have to devote to the cap, to Jones. So at that point, I suspect it makes sense for the Giants to make Kenny Golladay a pre-June 1st cut. Even though the savings will be less, it just makes more sense, because if you do Golladay as a pre-June 1st cut, you get Dexter Lawrence extended, you get Leo Williams reduced, you can make up some of that money that you have to now devote to Daniel Jones on the tag. So that's one thing, school of thought behind the timing. If Golladay is a post-June 1st cut, that will probably mean that the Giants were able to get something done with Daniel Jones to where they don't have they can afford to wait to dip into the money, which would be $13.5 million if they make him a post-June 1st cut. So again, if Golladay is a pre-June 1st transaction, the Giants would save $6.7 million. That money would be available to them immediately. If they make him post-June 1st cut, it's $13.5 million. Plus the contract doesn't come fully off the books until 2024. And they cannot use the money that they would save from Golladay until June 1st. So as I've been saying all along, folks, it all hinges on what happens with Daniel Jones. If he is franchised, then I think the Giants will make Golladay a pre-June 1st cut. If he is not franchised and they're able to sign him to a multi-year deal by the deadline, which in this case would be March 7th would be the last day to tag a guy, I could see Golladay being a post-June 1st cut. Now, some of you have already asked me, why are the Giants waiting? Why don't they just get rid of Golladay right now? It's a matter of timing, folks. And here's the reason behind it. Technically, we are still in the 2022 league year, which means that if the Giants were to make the move today, and as I record this, this is February 28th for March 1st show. If they made the move today, that means that the Golladay transaction would automatically be treated as a post-June 1st cut, plus the fact that Golladay has $4.5 million roster bonus guaranteed to him in 2023. All of that would accelerate into 2022, all right? And the Giants don't have a whole lot of money to absorb that. That would actually put them over the cap, and they would have to cut guys, and it would just totally mess up their cap. So by waiting until March 15th, which is the start of the new league year, now any transactions they make from March 15th, 4:00 March 15th onward, that goes into the 2023 league year. So that's the purpose behind the timing, for those of you who are wondering about that. Okay, so Golladay is out. That experiment, unfortunately, did not work out. And Shane, interestingly, he was asked about receiver and the plans for that. And basically, he didn't say draft. He didn't say free agency. He didn't say trade. He basically said, we are going to keep our eyes wide open. We can get something, we can look everywhere for receiver help. They do need receiver help, that's for sure. But where that receiver help is going to come from, I have no idea. I'll be honest with you. I know Pro Football Focus had a proposal that the Giants trade for DeAndre Hopkins. And I believe the proposal was a 2nd round pick and a 5th round pick. I don't see that happening. If I'm the Giants, I don't trade my 2nd round pick. I might consider trading the 2nd of my 3rd round picks and maybe a 5th round pick or a 6th round pick, better yet, because they've got 2 picks in the 3rd round and I believe 2 in the 6th round. But that proposal by Pro Football Focus, I just don't see it happening for DeAndre Hopkins. So, it's going to be interesting to see what the Giants do to find receiver help, because The free agency class right now is not very strong. The draft class, I've had people tell me mixed opinions about it. That it tends to heavily favor the slot receiver as opposed to the X receiver. So we'll have to just see how that works out, because the Giants are going to, if worst case scenario, they make do with what they've got and maybe add a couple guys in the draft, but it's going to be interesting to see how that works out for them. All right. Coming up next, I have a few more nuggets from Joe Schoen's media sessions with the media. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we're recapping day number 1 at the Combine. The general managers and head coaches spoke. For the Giants, just general manager Joe Schoen spoke to the media. Head coach Brian Daboll declined to speak. Probably because, it's contract roster building season, and that's Shane's wheelhouse, even though Daboll has, has something to say about that. Probably figured, let Shane talk about what he wants to talk about with regards to that. So we're going over the key points to come out of those media conferences. There were 2, as I mentioned, one on the podium with all the reporters in general, and then one behind the curtain, so to speak, with the Giants beat writers. So I've got the information on both of them for you here. And before I get into some additional nuggets, just a quick programming note coming up this week on the program. Tomorrow, I'm going to have Coach Keith Sanchez, who is one half of the dynamic duo on the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. You heard Damian Parson last week on the show, and I know a lot of you enjoy listening to him. Coach Keith is going to be just as good. I promise you. You will not want to miss that show. Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints, who is at the Combine, is going to be on with me as well. And Ross kind of owes me a favor. He was supposed to come on with me after the Senior Bowl, but we couldn't work it out because the Saints kept making news. But Ross is going to come on with me, and I promise you that show will be worth a listen as well. Ross is really good when it comes to the X's and O's and prospects, and he's got some interesting perspectives, which is why I've asked him to come on the show with me. And Rick Saratella is also supposed to come on the show with me as well. So I'm excited to have Rick on. He's always a fountain of knowledge. Rick is, of course, with NFL Draft Bible, which you can find on the SI.com's Fan Nation network, which is where also Giants Country is, the site that I work with. So check out Rick's work as well. That's all coming up on the Locked On Giants podcast. Hope you will tune in. And we'll do extra shows if we need to over the weekend, by the way, since the Combine does run into the weekend. So we won't leave you hanging for too long, promise. Okay, let's get back to some of these nuggets from Joe Schoen's 2 pressers. Now, something I've been saying for quite a while now is that I do not think the Giants are going to bring back Julian Love. I've said this, countless times on the program. I've written it in Giants Country. I don't think they're going to have the financial wherewithal to afford Julian Love. And Shane made an interesting comment in his private session with the media, and that he said that they were anticipating some veteran safeties to be released. And it almost sounded like they were going to maybe look to get one of those veteran safeties who might come a little cheaper than what it might cost to re-sign Julian Love. Julian Love, from what I understand, I've heard numbers somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 million APY for him, which might be a little too rich for what the Giants are willing to pay. So I don't think Julian Love comes back. And just hearing Shane and what he had to say, I'm more convinced than ever that I'm on the right track with that. He mentioned that they met with Leonard Williams' agent. Now, Leonard Williams currently has the highest cap hit on the Giants, over $32 million. He's not playing on that number, folks. I keep telling you that. I don't see it happening. They do want to extend Leonard Williams. They still think Leonard Williams can be a very good player, is a very good player. Leonard has had some injury issues the last couple of years. So an extension, I don't think will be more than 3 years. if for no other reason, just to kind of spread out that money a little bit. Maybe there'll be an avoidable year on there, but they do want to extend Leonard and in the process lower that cap number. Because again, going back to what I said about Daniel Jones, if they have to slap the franchise tag on him, they're going to need to make up that difference as best as they can so that they have money to operate and add to the roster. Dexter Lawrence is another player they're looking to lower the number on. Dexter is right now set to play on the option year of his rookie deal, which I think has a $12 million cap hit. They want to get that number down, and they feel that they can. So they've had discussions with Dexter's agents as well. So we'll see if they're able to work something out with that. Shane mentioned that they have had preliminary talks with Nick Gates and John Feliciano. Folks, I still don't think they bring back both of those guys. I would like to see both of them back. I don't think it happens. Again, I go back to what I've been saying all along. If I'm the Giants, one of my top priorities in this draft is to get a young center who has played the position, who can be the orchestrator of that offensive line, the conductor, if you will. And, if they bring back Gates and or Feliciano, you're probably looking at a 1 to 2 year deal at most. And it's a Band-Aid is basically what it is. At this point, get a young center, maybe bring back one of Feliciano and Gates, but get a young center in here and just continue building that offensive line, because the interior of the offensive line in particular wasn't very good last year. And it didn't matter who was in there. It just wasn't as good as you'd like it to be. So that's why I am beating the drum loudly for a young center in this draft. Okay. A couple of other things that Shane mentioned. He spoke of Xavier McKinney, who recently changed agents. I think McKinney switched to Drew Rosenhaus. I still don't believe that McKinney is going to have discussions, or I should say McKinney's rep is going to have discussions with the Giants about a new contract right now, nor should he, because as I have said constantly, McKinney is staying around East Rutherford to work on rehabbing his hand. See where that hand is, because not for nothing, McKinney has missed a couple, in at least 2 of his seasons, large chunks of times due to injuries. So before you're going to invest in him, you want him to stay healthy, number one. And granted, the 2 injuries he's had have been freak injuries, the broken leg, then the hand injury. But you need him to stay healthy. That's something that they have to take into consideration, and they will take into consideration. See what that, what his hand looks like. Does he get the full grip back in his hand? Can he get to the point where he doesn't have to play with the splint that he did towards the end of last year? All of that is going to factor into the decision as to when or if they decide to start talking to McKinney. So that's what I look for there. They also mentioned Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas, no surprise here. They have to make a decision on whether to pick up the option year of his rookie deal by the first Tuesday after the draft. And Shane indicated that they are leaning that way. Like, duh. I mean, that's like a no-brainer, I think. But ultimately, what I think the Giants want to do with Thomas is you can't extend everybody in one shot. Because if you do that, then everybody's contracts are going to swell at the same time. And you want to stagger them, as I mentioned. So I could see a scenario where Andrew Thomas plays this year, continues to play this year on his rookie deal. Then come next March, maybe, that's when they look to extend him. I think it might be too early for him. Whereas with Dexter Lawrence, with reports of Washington planning to franchise tag Daron Payne, I would make that a priority. I would get that done now before Payne and Chris Jones and the whole interior defensive line market gets reset. So I would think that Dexter Lawrence's contract is a little bit more of a priority at this stage of the game. So overall, business as usual at the combine. The Giants they're going to meet with players. They're going to talk with players. Of course, they'll be watching the drills and whatnot. They'll be talking to agents. There's a lot of stuff that hopefully they'll be able to accomplish. Most of all, getting closer on deals for Jones and Barkley before that March 7th deadline when the tag window closes. Will it happen? We will see. Of course, we here at the Locked On Giants podcast will bring you all the latest news, as well as anything else that happens that warrants a quick short if you're on YouTube. So make sure you keep it here on Locked On Giants all week. And again, if we need to do some more shows over the weekend, we will, so that you have the latest on what's going on at the combine. That's going to do it for us today for the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or watching on YouTube, your first watch. We'll be back at you tomorrow, Giant fans.